I kind of hate being called a motivational speaker. And the reason I hate being called a motivational speaker is I don't like giving advice and I don't necessarily want to motivate or inspire people. If I can offer anything to people, it's perspective. And the reason why perspective is so important is it allows you to see the bigger picture and it gives you an opportunity to see things from the other side. I remember one time in college getting in a car accident. A car pulled out in front of me quickly, I slammed on my brakes, and when I slammed on my brakes not to hit that car, I got rear-ended from behind by a semi, and then I hit the car that was in front of me. All of us got out of our car, made sure everybody was okay, and then we tried to figure out what happened. And nobody really knew whose fault it was. And when the cop came up and tried to decide who was at fault for this car accident, everybody blamed somebody else. It took like an hour for this cop interviewing all of us separately, talking to people who weren't involved with the wreck to gain the right perspective on what actually took place. And that car accident, that's kind of how life goes. We all have a different perspective on why things are the way they are, or who's at fault or who's not at fault, or why the world works the way the world works. And if you can't learn to gain a bigger perspective on the world, that's when you get stuck in your tiny little bubble. I travel the world talking to young people, and it blows my mind that you guys have a computer in your pocket, yet your perspective sometimes is as big as the small towns that you guys come from. I think that if you want to grow your perspective, you've got to step outside of yourself and you've got to put yourself in a position to experience things that you have never experienced before. Some of the biggest issues that I see with youth culture today is just a lack of perspective. It boils down to a lot of selfishness and a lack of perspective. I see a lot of people walking around with this perspective of, I'm going to do what's easiest for me, not what's best for everybody else. And if you want to grow in your perspective, there's a few easy ways to do it. One of the simplest ways to grow in your perspective is learn how to live in the moment. So many of you guys are trying to capture a moment, or you're looking on your phone at something happening somewhere else that you're not even present with what's happening around you. If you can't be present in a moment, you're never going to learn to gain perspective. So much of what's broken today is people not understanding how to just appreciate a moment for what it is, learn from it, and continue to move on. Another way you can grow in your perspective is realize this truth. It's better to be loving than it is to be right. Some of you guys are so focused on being right or proving your point that you forget the opportunity that you have to love someone or have a real conversation with another person. Until you can understand why someone thinks what they think or why someone does what they do, you're never going to understand their perspective. And if you can't understand their perspective, how could you possibly understand them? It's crazy how many people want to win an argument on the internet just to show people that their perspective is right. I've yet to see somebody change their mind because of a tweet. I've yet to see someone change the way that they feel about something because someone said something in a comment on Facebook or YouTube. You guys have to understand, it's more important to be loving than it is to just try and be right all the time. Another thing that you can do is be grateful. Set the habit of trying to find one thing to be grateful for every day. I constantly remind myself of the little things that I have to be grateful for daily, and I really think that drastically improves my perspective on the world. Sometimes it's easy to think that the world's against us. It's easy to think that everybody's got it better than we do. It's easier to look at someone else's life and think, oh, that's life goals. I wish I had your life. But truly, if you took a step back and just thought about the things that you do have and found a way to be grateful for those, I really think you would improve your perspective. Another idea, and I know this might sound cliche, is help others every chance you get. I know the world is telling you guys to give back. I know the world is telling you that you have to do community service. But there's a reason for that. When you serve other people, you learn to appreciate what you have. When you give, that's that opportunity for you to recognize how valuable small things are. When I started Skate for Change and I started handing out socks, I had no idea how important that was to another person. But the more I've done it, the more I've recognized giving little things, being a person who's filled with service, it grows your perspective. It gives you a bigger view of what the world is really about. Another habit that I think is really important for you to develop is learn to be a spectator of your own thoughts. And what I mean by this is simple. Try to understand why things make you angry. That conversation that's happening in your head, don't just say something because you're frustrated. Don't just say something because you're angry. Learn why you say it. Learn why these things anger you. Before you just write something on the internet or before you just go have an argument with another person because they don't believe what you believe, just take a minute and pause and just try to figure out, why do I believe this? The best leaders, the people who actually go out and create things, they're not trying to figure out what people are doing. They're trying to figure out why people do it. I care way more about why my staff acts a certain way or why I respond to something in a certain way than what the scenario was that caused me to respond that way in the first place. Perspective, I truly believe, is one of those skills that if you want to create, if you want to lead, if you want to do something bigger than yourself, you're going to have to grow in your perspective. And the first place your perspective starts to grow is when you do things that are uncomfortable or you have conversations with people that think and believe differently than you do. Think about who you hang out with. Is it the same activity weekend in and weekend out with the same group of people? If it is, there's no way you're growing in your perspective. If you want to grow your perspective, start with the kids at your school. Start spending time with different people. Get to know other cultures. Go celebrate other people. If you guys want to grow in your perspective, don't be afraid of what makes you different. Learn to celebrate those things.